We are very fortunate today to be in the studio of the graphic designer and graphic novelist, Mike Cherkas, who's one of the graphic novels, Red Harvest, about Holodomor, is shortlisted for Kobzar Book Award. And it's not every day that you get to interview an author, but also an artist of the book and in his studio. So that's why I'm so smiling. I'm very fortunate to be here. Thank you for inviting us. And I'd like to talk to you more about this book, Red Harvest. First of all, how do you write a graphic novel about such a tragic event, tragic period in Ukrainian history?
With great difficulty. It starts with a lot of research. I spent not 5 full years, but parts of 5 or 6 years just researching the project before I even started to write and draw it. It actually began with a phone call from a colleague of mine from the Toronto cartooning community, James Whaley, who called me up one day in about 2008 or 2009 and said, "Mike, what do you know about the Holodomor? I know you're Ukrainian." And so we talked about it a little bit, and we talked about this project for about 3 or 4 years, and then eventually he left the project, and I continued on with it, and just continued reading and listening to survivor stories to try to get a sense of what happened. I read some academic histories, I read some memoirs, and in the hope that I wouldn't crib too much from that other material, right? But you really needed survivors' testimonies to try to figure out what actually happened at the village level in Ukraine. And then once I've done my research, then you start trying to put together the story about this family that I decided it would be a story about a family where only one person survived the Holodomor. And so it becomes a story about how they managed to survive up to a certain point, and how did the one child who did survive, how did he survive the Holodomor? One other aspect I introduced into it was that one of the characters in the story, the survivor is Mykola Kovalenko. His sister is Nadia Kovalenko, and his older sister Nadia gets married to the village Bolshevik, who then they leave the village and they come back as thousanders, the activists who come to forcibly collectivize the village. So partly his family kind of survives part of it because his sister is connected to the thousanders. So anyway, so that's part of, like, you devise the plot, and then I start drawing, and then this is where the work becomes kind of like, it becomes all-encompassing. You have to devote a lot of time to it. So you pencil the pages, you'll letter them, and then I ink them. So that's kind of the process from point A to point B. Once the artwork is finished, I scan all the pages and then make all the proofreading corrections. My wife read the story 3 times to make sure that everything was spelled correctly, try to get the correct transliteration of Ukrainian names, etc. And so
that's so important, like especially if you have Ukrainian names or Slavic names from any language, to transliterate it correctly, or words into English. You mentioned that your hero is fictional character and his family. First of all, tell me why you approached the story like that. Instead of telling maybe about a group of people, you approached, like, to focus on one family, on one hero. And I have to add to this that my grandmother actually lived through the Holodomor. She survived. She's one of the 5 children, and one of her oldest sister was also married a communist in the village. So, these things happened, these stories. And the other sister was working in Kharkiv in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
So she was bringing scraps of food to the youngest children. That's how they survived. But this is a side story.
Well, it's interesting because that is like the story of like a very few surviving, and the whole thing about the collaboration with that there were villagers that collaborated, even though we know that in Ukraine, the number, there were far less Bolsheviks in Ukraine than in Russia, but there were still at the village level a number of people that would say they were going to collaborate, or they saw there was a future there. But
for many reasons, people chose to do this thing or the other. We don't know. It's hard to judge when you're not in that situation. But to answer my question about your character, that you chose to focus on one specific person and his family, as opposing to the whole village, or maybe.
I think there is an answer to that, and I think it was Stalin that said, "One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic," and that's why you kind of focus on the single family, because then you can bring it down to it's not 4 million people dying. It's a family, and more people I think they can relate to that more than, because as soon as you get into the big numbers, people go, that's, even now, like today, you think about the number of people that are dying in the war, or the number is huge, and it just does become a statistic. And so by focusing on the family, I think it makes it a more personal story, makes it easier for the reader to identify with it.
And what was you mentioned that you researched extensively on this topic for years. You were reading different archives and searching different literature, and also photographs, because this is a graphic novel. It's not only you need to know the information and specific stories, but also you need to envision how it looked like, so you can draw it. So tell me, please, what were the most challenging part in that research?
Finding actual photographs of the famine was difficult, because we know there's very few in the archives. I think there's about 150 photos taken by the Austrian trade representative in Kharkiv. And a lot of his photos are very grainy, so you're looking at them, you can't really see what's there. So I think the lack of good photo reference from the Holodomor actually almost dictated the art style, where it becomes very sketchy, where there's certain things in the book, like I just scribble things, because I really there wasn't a lot of clarity there. All the good photographs from the Holodomor or from that era are Soviet propaganda photos that are amazingly well lit. They'll have the whole village gathered at a volunteer collective join the collective meeting, right? And it's amazingly well lit, and you're going, how did they get all those people there? Because because as a graphic designer, I kind of understand the technical difficulties of creating these big, massive propaganda photos, right? But the photography from the Holodomor is that actually shows it. There's so little of it. There's the Austrian trade representative, whose name I don't have in my head right now, but I'm sure that we can fill that in. And there was another series of photographs taken by a villager in the Donbass, and he's got photographs where he took photos of his family, and then he did the same shot 3 weeks later, and there's 3 people are gone because they died. So there's a lot of very it's grim, right? So the other stuff I did do a lot of research on is I did find photography from rural Ukraine taken in the 1890s, which probably still was valid in the 1930s. There wouldn't have been a lot of changes in the villages.
You mean like scenery and landscapes and
landscape villages, stuff like that. So, so I found some really good old archival photography from the 1890s, primarily from the Cherkasy region. So.
Oh, interesting. And what about the other part of the research, the information and the history of these tragic events?
Most of that was the actual history. There's the Robert Conquest book, Harvest of Sorrow. which is actually, that's very academic. It's filled with lots of statistics. And then actually as the, this all it relates to the war in Ukraine now, because as the Russian increased their, like after 2014, that's when they invaded Crimea.
Yes.
There was a lot more information about Ukraine available then. And then after 2022, there's like it's just exploded.
You mean historical?
Yeah, like finding out stuff about Ukraine. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to have in the book. I wanted to kind of include in the story without actually stopping the story and saying this happened on such and such a date. Like I wanted to really get across the point of the 5 stalks of grain, where the decree in August of, I think it was 1932, and then the blacklisting in the villages of November of 1932, which really caused the actual, like the worst part of the famine. So I wanted to make sure that information was in the book, because otherwise it's difficult to understand how it happened. It's also because of the way they tax the villagers. It's hard to explain that, because they were taxing them through requisitions of the crops, not money. It was like what you grew, you gave to them. So, and that had to be explained, because prior to me starting the research on this, the Holodomor is, I've never read a really good explanation of why it happened, because a lot of the histories, especially of the Soviet Union, are Russian-centered, and many are sympathetic to Stalin. So you get this. There was one biography of Stalin that I read years ago, and I thought, now I'll find out what happened in the Holodomor, right? There's 3 pages devoted to the famine, and they blamed it on the peasants. And you're going,
of course. Soviet propaganda.
Yeah, so it was kind of, that's one of the things I really wanted to get across, that it was through no fault of the peasants. It was all state-directed. So.
And the same is happening today.
Yeah.
Already, they start to call it Holodomor, because now people in Ukraine are, dying in the -20-degree weather, because they don't have heat, they don't have electricity, they don't have power. So here we go again. History repeats. Russia is doing it one more time to Ukrainians. Going back to your book, when author is writing, he or she, they have already their readers in mind, like a group of readers in mind. So who do you think this book is written for?
It's written for me.
That's great.
I think, unless you're writing for a very specific audience, like you're writing young adult graphic novels or young adult novels, or a romance or something, those are directed at a specific audience. I think Red Harvest is directed at, I'm going to say it's anybody can read it, but definitely a little, like a child isn't going to enjoy it. They're going to look at it and say, there's no superheroes in this thing. Because some people have asked me at conventions or things, could my 8-year-old read this? And I say, not really. It's not an 8-year-old's comic book. But anybody who's in high school, like grade 9 or 10 and above, it's anybody who's from a teenager, adolescent to an old guy like me can enjoy it. Having said that, I'd like to think that the audience for this is people who've never really heard about the Holodomor, because some people have. When I talk to people at comic book conventions, people go, "Oh, I've heard of that," and they'll buy it. And some people, and I get a lot of people, non-Ukrainians, come up and just buy it right away. So, because that's what they want to find out about it. So,
and it's a different genre. It's a graphic novel, and some people prefer that. And also young readers. Also.
Graphic novels apparently I was reading this once a little while ago because somebody was asking me the similar question: who reads graphic novels? And generally, there's the audience for graphic novels. The biggest is between 15 and 35. So they've really taken to the graphic novel. And if you go into a bookstore now, like Indigo has a whole wall of graphic novels, or I look on Amazon sometimes and I go, I've never heard of 95% of these graphic novels. And there's tons for little kids. There's tons for like, I'm going to talk about little kid graphic novels for a minute, like those ones by Dave Pilkey, like Cat Kid Club. Those are the biggest selling graphic novels. Like he's like, if you look at the bestseller list for graphic novels, his books are 8 out of 10. So there is a big
niche on that.
Yeah.
But tell us, take us about the process of one day working on this book, like drawing and maybe a little bit of writing. Like, how does that look like? How do you draw these pictures and then transfer them to the pages of the novel?
So I'll start with very rough sketches, pencil sketches, and I can show you'll see some of these. And this graphic novel was done in a completely different manner, because what I would do is I did the pencil sketches on a thin piece of paper, and then I did my inking. I'm going to get the pen that I did my inking with. This is the pen that I inked it with. It's a ballpoint pen, cheap little ballpoint pen that I buy at Muji, the store up at Yorkdale. And I think there's Mujis in different malls across Canada. But anyway, they had these great cheap ballpoint pens. And so all of the scribbly, like the line work is all done with this. And it's done, basically, I lay the final, the piece of paper that I'm going to ink on top of the rough pencil drawings, and then using a light table, I just sketch right on top of that. So there's basically, in a way, there's basically three stages of the process. There's the really rough pencil. Then I'll do some scripting on top of the rough pencil to try to figure out, because I will have words figured out, right? Sometimes I'll have a whole dialogue written out, and then once I go to actually do the final, I will edit it again as I'm doing the final writing. So there's a number of levels. So basically, I start with the rough pencils, then the good pencils, and then the ink. So there's 3 stages to the artwork.
And then do you have to design your page like on the computer or layout?
Well, the page is like, that's one piece of artwork.
Oh, that's one piece of artwork.
Yeah, okay. And then I scan everything, and then once everything's scanned, I'll adjust so that the blacks are blacker,
So you make final adjustments digitally.
Yeah, and any kind of spelling mistakes, because like I said, my wife read the story 3 times, and we were sitting there staring at the computer reading it. Says, "You got to fix that letter. I can't tell if that's a W or an N."
Oh yeah.
Kind of thing. Or there's just mistakes in spelling. Because I do have to say, this is because I grew up in the age of before Ukrainian names were transliterated properly. All the ICH names are YCH now, and so I was trying to, I have to make sure, because
there are different ways to spell them.
Yeah, because like names, people that I grew up with, their last name, if it was VICH, now it'd be VYCH or whatever, right?
Or double I now.
And then there would be people who had their names translated, and they had the Polish spelling, right, in their names.
Different spelling. Interesting. Thank you for taking us inside your work a little bit. And now I have a question about the editing of this book and publishing. How did you look for publisher, and who was interested to publish this book?
Before I did the Red Harvest, I did a series of books called The Silent Invasion, which I have 3 well-read copies here, or 4 copies here. And The Silent Invasion is a book about UFOs and the Red Scare set in the 1950s.
Oh, interesting.
And it's sort of a mystery thriller, but it's sort of
like a sci-fi?
Yeah, sci-fi mystery thriller, slightly humorous. There's a bit of it's sort of almost a parody of science fiction movies and the B-grade film noir movies of the 50s. And it's done in a completely different style, and I can show you. We all get pages, but you see, it's
okay. I see. We show it on camera. So.
Yeah, completely different.
So this involves more sketching, right, and more coloring, because you have black and gray areas here.
Well, this is done again. It's whereas this was inked with a ballpoint pen. This is all done with a watercolor brush.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So all the blacks are like just. I fill my brush with ink and then start laying it down.
This reminds me of American cartoons I watched when I was a child in the 70s.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be, yeah, because it's far more cartoony.
Yes.
So anyway, it's published by a publisher in New York called NBM Graphic Novels. And I got a...
Red Harvest?
Red Harvest... after the war started, he knew I was working on it, and this is at 2022. He said, "How quickly can you have that done?" So.
Oh wow. Okay.
So when I started, at the time that he agreed to publish it, which is 2022 February, March, shortly after the full-on invasion. I had about a third of it finished, and then, so I had to finish 2/3 of it. So from March of, I'm going to say March or April of 2022 up until August 3rd, 2023. Yeah. I was working on it. Well, and that wasn't the only thing I was working on, because I was actually finishing, I was doing a lot of graphic design work, and I was also doing a story in this book called Comics for Ukraine, and I did this story called Talking to a Hill for them. So, and that is a story about a woman who lives in Kiev, married to a Ukrainian fellow, but she's an ethnic Russian, and her mother lives in Moscow.
Oh, and she talks to her mom?
And she's talking to her mother on the phone. Her mother on the phone thinks they should move to Moscow to escape the Nazis, and so anyway.
Yeah, so it has stories like this.
Yeah, this is actually based on stuff. A good friend of mine said he's, I guess he's got relatives in Kiev, and they also have relatives in Moscow, and the ones in Moscow were completely, they had no idea what was going on. So.
They have no idea, or they pretend not to have.
Yeah, so anyway, so I did that, and so basically the, yeah, for, I guess, 15 months I was working on it pretty.
Is this book in major bookstores in North America? Because we really have a problem finding Ukrainian historical and any literature, even modern translations, on the shelves in the mainstream bookstores.
You know, it is. I've seen it in mainstream bookstores in Rochester. We were in Barnes and Nobles in Rochester in November, and the day before the election, and I found one there. So. If it is in a mainstream bookstore, there'll be 1 or 2 copies. I've seen it at Indigo.
Okay, that's great.
And it is available through Amazon. And it is the kind of book, because NBM they've got ISBN numbers, and it is distributed by they're connected with a distributor in Chicago, that any bookstore can find it. If you want to buy it in a bookstore and they don't have it, you can go to the salesperson and say, I want to order this book, and they can order it. And I know that Indigo, some people I know, they ordered it through Indigo and they would go pick it up at the bookstore. So it is available. And it's gone into its second printing.
Oh,
not to toot my own horn, but it went into its second printing, I guess, last fall, I think. So
that's great news.
Yeah, and in the United States, they have a thing called there's an organization called the Junior Library Guild, and they recommend books for school libraries, and it's been in their recommendation. Okay. It's in their recommendation, and so they've had like a fair number of, like a fairly, I think it's a substantial number of books printed with library bindings, that is, so that they're sold specifically to libraries, and both printings, first and second printing, had substantial library.
That's a good news. Congratulations! And I'm very happy to say that we featured this book at the Speaker's Corner at the Ukrainian Festival in Toronto 2 years ago.
Yes.
2 years ago. Can you imagine? It's already actually 2.5. And we also featured that you were so kind to talk to the high school students of Ukrainian Saturday schools, and it was very interesting lecture which our program organizes, Contact Next Generation, and it's called Leadership Speaker Series, so I'm grateful for that. I actually listened to your talk. It was very captivating and interesting to hear.
I don't know how many kids got lost listening to it.
I will explain to you later about the process. And we featured your book at KUNF, I remember. It was a year ago. Yes, so this book has been around, and I am very glad that there's one more book added to the shelf of the Holodomor stories. For the same reason, I wrote a story for the Holodomor bus about my grandmother surviving Holodomor, because I want my children and I want the children also to know what happened, and through the prospect of the child, telling the story, and involving Holodomor bus, which is very important in Canada, mobile classroom. So thank you very much, Mike, for taking us on the journey of your writing and drawing of your book. Again, congratulations of being shortlisted.
Thank you.
We wish you all good luck with Kobzar Book Awards.
Thank you. I'm terrified of the reading, because
I give lessons. I'm joking. So congratulations and thank you very much. And I understand you're working now on the second book, which you mentioned before in the interview. And it will be interesting to see and talk about when the time comes.
Yeah, I hope it comes out in the next 3 years, because it's a long process, and part of that, that's a fictional memoir, right? That's part of it.
Yes, well, that makes it easier, because then nobody can point to any mistakes there.
Yeah, except my family will get angry.
Oh, that's a different story. Well, thank you, Mike. All the best to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and glad to do this. Thanks.
And to our viewers, Kobzar Book Award presentation is happening on March 26th at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. And for tickets and more information, please visit kobzarbookaward.com.